Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins not with a scream, but with a photograph. A simple image, frozen in time, capturing faces, laughter, and death. When Hercule Poirot is handed an old photograph found beside a murdered man, he sees what no one else can. A tilt of a head, a hand too still, a smile that doesn't belong. Clues hidden in plain sight. But what if the photograph itself was meant to deceive? What if the killer wasn't behind the camera, but inside it? Stay with us till the end, as Poirot untangles a puzzle that blurs the line between memory, truth, and murder. And if you enjoy stories where every frame hides a secret, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Photograph Arrives. It was a gray morning when the letter came. The kind of morning where even the air seemed hesitant, as if the world held its breath. Hercule Poirot sat by the window of his modest London flat, sipping a cup of dark tea. Rain brushed softly against the glass, tracing faint rivers that caught the dim light. He was not expecting mail. Not today. When the envelope slipped through the letter slot, it landed without a sound. Plain, cream-colored, no return address. Only his name typed neatly across the front. Hercule Poirot, it read, nothing more. He stared at it for a moment, eyebrows slightly raised. Then, delicately, he picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The seal was broken easily. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper and a photograph. He lifted the photograph first. A black and white image. Grainy. Old. It showed a group of people standing in front of a house. Tall, with ivy crawling across its brick face. The photograph was dated in the corner, June 1927. 5 people stood in a neat row. 4 smiled. 1 did not. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. The woman on the far left wore a long dress and a wide hat. Cheerful, radiant. Beside her, a man in uniform. Then, a younger man holding a cigarette. A woman in pearls. And on the far right, a tall man, his face half in shadow. But it wasn't the people that unsettled Poirot. It was the note beneath the photo. Typed. Cold. Simple. One of them is a murderer. The crime has not yet happened. He read it again, his expression unreadable. Slowly, Poirot rose, carrying the photograph toward the light. The rain outside darkened the sky further, and the faces in the image looked almost alive in the shifting reflection. He murmured softly, "A murderer, but a crime that has not yet happened." He set the photograph down on his table. Then he noticed something else, faint smudges on the edge of the paper. Someone had handled it recently. Someone nervous. A knock came at the door. Poirot turned. "Enter," he said. It was Inspector James Hensley, an old acquaintance, tall, broad, always in a hurry. "Morning, Poirot," he said briskly. "You might want to see this." He placed a newspaper on the table. Strange one, this. Poirot glanced down. The headline read, "Reclusive artist found dead in his studio. Apparent suicide." "Name?" Poirot asked. "Jonathan Rain," Hensley said. "Painter, 40 years old. Live alone on Blackwood Street. Neighbors heard nothing." Poirot turned the page slowly, eyes scanning the article. Then he looked up. "And what, my friend, makes this strange?" Hensley hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another photograph, the same one Poirot had just received. Poirot's expression hardened. "Where did you get this?" "It was found on the body," Hensley said quietly. Same note, same message. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain against the window. Poirot looked down at the 2 photographs, side by side, identical. One came through his letter slot. The other, found with a dead man. "This," Poirot said softly, "is not suicide. It is an invitation." That afternoon, Poirot and Hensley visited the dead artist's studio. It was a small room cluttered with canvases, brushes, and half-finished paintings. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and dust. Poirot moved slowly, his sharp eyes tracing every inch of the space. A broken teacup lay on the floor. An overturned chair. No signs of struggle, yet nothing felt peaceful here. He paused before the easel in the center. On it, a painting, unfinished. It showed the same house from the photograph. The ivy, the door, the windows, every detail perfect. But there was one addition, a shadowy figure in the doorway. Head bowed, face hidden. Poirot leaned closer. Curious, he whispered. The artist painted this before he died. But who stands in that doorway? Hensley folded his arms. Maybe he saw something. Maybe someone was threatening him. Or, Poirot said, perhaps he saw the truth, and someone silenced him before he could speak it. Poirot looked again at the painting. The brushstrokes were uneven near the door, almost as if the artist's hand had trembled. A single fingerprint marked the edge of the canvas. He turned to Hensley. We must find his house. The house in the photograph. It is the key. Hensley sighed. Do you know where it is? Poirot smiled faintly. Not yet, but the ivy grows thick on the north wall. The sun falls from the east. The photograph was taken in summer. There are 5 chimneys, a rare thing in London. We shall find it. By evening they did. The house stood on the edge of Hampstead Heath, old and weathered, half hidden behind a wrought iron gate. The ivy had grown wild, curling up toward the roof like dark veins. As Poirot and Hensley approached, the front door opened slowly. A woman stepped out. She was in her 60s, thin, gray-haired, wearing black. Her expression was cautious, but not afraid. Yes, she said softly. Poirot introduced himself and explained why they had come. When he showed her the photograph, she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Oh dear, that picture, I thought was lost years ago. You recognize it? Poirot asked. Yes, that was taken here, this very house. My family and some friends. I was the young woman in pearls. Poirot nodded. And the others? She pointed one by one. My sister, Margaret. Her husband, Captain George Hill. The young man with the cigarette was Arthur Blake, a journalist, I think. The tall man on the right, that was Charles Gray, a family friend. Poirot's gaze lingered on the man in shadow. And what became of them? The woman hesitated. Margaret died years ago. George moved abroad. Arthur vanished. No one ever found him. And Charles, he passed away last winter. Poirot tilted his head slightly. So only you remain from that photograph. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Only me. Inside the house, time seemed to stand still. Dust hung in the air like memory itself. Portraits lined the walls, the same faces from the photograph, older now, fading in color. Poirot studied them quietly. Tell me, madam, he said, did Mr. Rain, the artist, ever contact you? Her brow furrowed. Jonathan Rain? I knew him once. Long ago. He painted my sister's portrait. Why do you ask? He was found dead, Poirot said gently. And this photograph was with him. Her eyes widened. But that can't be. He wrote to me just last week. Said he had discovered something terrible. Something about that photograph. Poirot's voice lowered. Did he say what he found? She shook her head. Only that the truth was hidden in plain sight. Poirot fell silent. He walked back to the photograph and held it up again, letting the light fall across its surface. The shadows deepened around the tall man, Charles Gray. His face blurred slightly where the photo had aged, but something about the outline felt wrong. He looked closer, and then he saw it. The background behind Gray, it didn't align with the others. The bricks, the shadow, the light. As though he had been placed there after the fact. Poirot spoke softly. This photograph has been altered. Hensley frowned. You mean someone edited it? Back in 1927. Yes, Poirot said. By hand. Someone cut and joined the image. That man, Charles Gray, was never standing there. He was added later. The woman gasped. But why? Poirot turned to her, eyes sharp. because the true figure who stood there was not meant to be seen. Night fell as Poirot and Hensley left the house. The street was empty, the air cold. Hensley broke the silence. "So what's your theory?" Poirot replied quietly. "A photograph, a dead painter, and a warning that the crime has not yet happened. Tell me, my friend, what if the crime is this one? What if Jonathan Rain died because he uncovered a secret hidden in that picture, a secret that has waited nearly 30 years to be seen?" Hensley looked at him uneasily. "Then who's next?" Poirot's eyes returned to the house behind them. One window glowed faintly with light. "The last woman in the photograph," he said. "If the past has returned, she may be the next to die." That night, Poirot placed the photograph on his bedside table and stared at it for a long time before turning off the light. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass, and in the faint reflection, for just a second, it seemed the faces in the photograph were no longer still. Chapter 2: The Man in the Shadows. The next morning broke with pale sunlight that barely touched the fog over London. The city seemed to be holding its secrets close. Poirot, precise as ever, sat at his desk. In front of him lay the photograph, 2 letters, and a list of names scribbled neatly in his small handwriting. He stared at the photograph for a long time, as though willing it to speak. 5 figures. For real. 1 false. A silent crowd frozen in time, hiding a crime that might still be waiting to happen. Inspector Hensley arrived shortly after breakfast, a paper tucked under his arm, and a look that told Poirot the night had not been restful. "I've done some digging," Hensley said, pulling out a chair. "You were right. The photograph was taken in 1927 at the old Greystone house. The woman we met last night, Evelyn Ward, was living there with her sister Margaret, both daughters of Lord Thomas Ward." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw the portrait of him in the hallway. A man of wealth and position, and of enemies, I suspect." Hensley smirked faintly. "Always." He opened his notebook. "Captain George Hill, Margaret's husband, died in an accident abroad. Fell from a balcony in Cairo 10 years ago. Charles Gray, the tall man businessman, died last year. Heart attack. Arthur Blake, vanished in 1930. No trace." Poirot leaned forward, and Jonathan Rain, the painter, knew them all. "Apparently so," Hensley said. "He was commissioned to paint the sisters before Margaret's death. But here's the odd thing. There's no record of the original photograph anywhere else. Not in family albums, not in archives, nowhere. It's as if it appeared from thin air." Poirot's expression darkened. "Then someone wanted it to exist only for this purpose, to reach me, and to reach Mr. Rain before his death." He picked up the photograph again, eyes narrowing. The Man in the Shadows. Charles Gray's figure was added. But who was removed? That afternoon, Poirot and Hensley returned to Greystone House. The air inside felt heavier than before, as if the walls themselves had been listening. Evelyn Ward greeted them politely, but with visible unease. "I haven't slept," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that picture. My sister, my friends, and that dark figure at the end. I keep thinking maybe it's a curse." Poirot's voice was gentle. "No curse, madame. Only a hand with reason. Someone altered that photograph to hide something, or someone. He asked to see the family's old albums, and she led them to a small study. The shelves were lined with leather-bound books and boxes filled with photographs. Poirot examined them carefully, one by one. Then, after several minutes, he stopped. "Here," he said softly. In one of the albums, dated summer 1927, was a nearly identical photograph. The same house, the same group, but taken from a slightly different angle. And this time, the man in shadow was gone. Instead, there was another figure, a sixth person, a young man, standing apart from the group, half turned toward the camera. His face clear, calm, intelligent. Poirot touched the corner of the page. Who is this? Evelyn leaned in, frowning. That's oh my. That's not possible. Who is he? Poirot repeated quietly. She hesitated. That was Thomas Avery. He was my father's secretary. He died the same year this picture was taken, drowned in the river behind the house. Poirot's voice lowered. And you say he drowned? Yes, she said uncertainly. They said he fell in by accident. But there were rumors that he knew something he shouldn't. Poirot closed the album slowly. The shadowed man, Charles Gray, was placed over Thomas Avery's position. Someone replaced the dead man with the living. Why hide Avery unless his death was no accident? They searched the old house that afternoon. The garden behind the house led to a narrow path running beside the river, dark, slow, and silent. The ivy-covered walls bent low toward the water. Poirot paused near the bank. Here, he asked softly. Yes, Evelyn said. They found him here, caught in the reeds. No signs of struggle. Everyone believed it was an accident. Poirot stared at the river, then down at the soil beneath his shoes. The ground was soft. Recent rain had left the earth uneven. He knelt, touched the dirt, and noticed a faint, dark imprint, the shape of a boot heel pressed deep. He looked up at Hensley. Someone has been here recently. Hensley nodded. Could be a trespasser. Or, Poirot said, someone checking to see if their past remains buried. Inside the house again, Evelyn offered them tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured. Mr. Poirot, she said suddenly, I never believed Thomas's death was an accident. But my father forbade me to speak of it. He said it would ruin the family. And after Margaret died, I tried to forget it all. But now, she looked up, eyes wide. What if someone is punishing us for what we buried? Poirot's tone was calm, but his words sharp. Tell me everything about that summer. Evelyn took a slow breath. It was hot that year. My sister had just married George Hill. We were celebrating the engagement here. Arthur Blake, the journalist, was there to write a piece about my father's art collection. Thomas Avery was helping manage his affairs. Everyone seemed happy at first. She paused, but there were tensions. George and Thomas argued constantly about money. Arthur was interested in Margaret, though she was newly married. And Charles Gray, he was always in the background, quiet, watching everyone. Poirot nodded slightly. And when did Thomas die? A week later. They said he went out for a walk by the river after dinner. He never returned. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And who found the body? Charles Gray, she said quietly. He said he had followed him to speak about business, but found him already gone. Poirot looked down at the photograph again, tracing his finger over the shadowed outline of the false figure. Charles Gray replaced the dead man in this photograph. That cannot be coincidence. That evening, Poirot returned home with the two photographs. He placed them side by side under his lamp. The differences were subtle, a tilt of the head here, a shift of shadow there. But the substitution of one man for another changed the entire meaning of the image. Poirot took out a magnifying glass and examined the original closely. At the edge of the frame, near the corner of the house, was something faint, almost invisible. He adjusted the light. There, a small reflection in one of the windows, a mirror-like glint, and in that glint, the outline of a hand holding the camera. Poirot whispered the photographer. He quickly checked the back of the image again. No name, no studio mark. But the angle suggested it had been taken by someone standing on the path, someone familiar with the house. He leaned back, thinking, if the photograph had been taken by the artist, Jonathan Rain, that meant Rain himself might have witnessed the true scene that night. And if he discovered the image had been altered years later, it could explain why he was killed. Poirot picked up the telephone and dialed Hensley. Inspector, he said, I believe the painter Jonathan Rain did not simply possess this photograph. He created it. He took the picture himself. He knew the truth, and he paid for it. Hensley's voice came over the line, tired but alert. Then who killed him? Poirot's voice was calm, but cold. Someone who feared the truth would finally be seen. 2 nights later, a second death occurred. The butler of Greystone House, an old man named Howard, was found dead in the garden, struck down near the river path. His lantern lay shattered beside him. There were no signs of a struggle, only the soft imprint of footsteps leading toward the water and disappearing into it. When Poirot arrived, Hensley met him at the gate. He must have seen something, Hensley said grimly, or someone didn't want him talking. Poirot examined the scene in silence. Then he said quietly, "This is no longer a secret buried in the past. The murderer is walking again among the living." He turned his gaze toward the house. Inside, a light flickered behind a curtain. "Someone in that photograph," he said, "still breathes. And they're not finished yet." That night, back in his flat, Poirot studied the photograph once more. He thought of the artist's trembling brush, the note that said the crime had not yet happened. And then, slowly, he understood. The note was not a prophecy. It was a warning. The photograph did not reveal the murderer of the past. It revealed the murderer who still lived, hidden beneath years of silence. Poirot whispered to the empty room, "The murderer in the photograph is not dead, and they're about to kill again." He placed the photograph back on his desk, turned out the light, and sat in the dark, eyes open, waiting for the next move. Chapter 3: The House of Secrets. The next morning, the sky hung low and colorless above London. A cold mist rolled through the streets, softening the sound of passing footsteps. Inside his quiet flat, Poirot sat perfectly still, hands folded before him. The photograph lay between 2 sheets of glass on his desk, protected, studied, and now more alive to him than ever before. A murderer had hidden inside it, not a shadow from the past, but a face that still walked among them. Poirot's thoughts were precise, ordered, yet tinged with unease. 2 deaths, Jonathan Rain, the painter who knew too much, and Howard, the butler who might have known more than he realized. Both connected to that single photograph, both silenced before they could speak. And, at the center of it all, Greystone House. He rose and put on his hat. "It is time," he murmured. "The truth waits where the secrets began." When Poirot and Inspector Hensley arrived at Greystone House that afternoon, the air around it seemed heavier than before. Clouds hung over the roof, and the ivy clung to the bricks like something alive. Evelyn Ward greeted them at the door. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she spoke. "Mr. Poirot," she whispered, "I can't stay here another night. Something's wrong in this house. I hear footsteps after dark, doors closing when no one is near. And now, poor Howard." Poirot's tone was steady. "Fear, madam, is a clever thing. It grows in silence, but truth will cut it down." She nodded weakly and led them inside. The drawing room was as they'd left it, portraits on the walls, dust gathering on the mantel. But the air felt charged, as though the house itself remembered what it had witnessed long ago. Poirot's eyes moved to the large painting above the fireplace, a portrait of Evelyn's sister, Margaret. Her painted eyes seemed to follow them. He turned to Evelyn. "Tell me again, madam. The night Thomas Avery died, who was in the house?" "Everyone from the photograph," she said quietly. "My father, my sister Margaret, her husband George, Arthur Blake, Charles Gray, and myself. Thomas left the dining room early that night. He said he wanted air. Charles followed him soon after." "Your father?" Poirot asked. "He was in his study. He always retired early." Poirot nodded. "And Arthur Blake?" She hesitated. "He was drinking, angry about something. I don't remember what." Poirot's expression remained calm, but his mind was racing. Anger, secrecy, a sudden death, and silence that lasted decades. "There is guilt in this house, Mrs. Ward. It does not belong to one person alone." Hensley began searching the lower rooms while Poirot climbed the staircase to the upper floor. The boards creaked beneath his shoes. At the end of the hall, he found a door half open, a study, untouched for years. Inside, the curtains were drawn, and the air was thick with dust. The desk was still covered in old papers, letters, and ledgers. Poirot moved carefully, touching nothing until something caught his eye, a small box, wooden, with a broken lock. Inside were several photographs, letters, and a diary. The handwriting was neat, careful. He opened to the first page. June 1927. Thomas Avery has discovered the truth about George Hill's investments. I fear he may go to the authorities. If he does, everything collapses. Poirot turned another page. Charles says he will speak with him tonight by the river. He promises to handle it quietly. Poirot closed the book slowly. So, he whispered, it was not an accident after all. He tucked the diary under his arm and descended the stairs. We entered the drawing room again. Hensley looked up from his notes. Find anything? Poirot placed the diary on the table. Enough to remove all doubt. Thomas Avery did not fall. He was silenced. Evelyn covered her mouth. But by whom? Poirot opened the diary again and pointed to the final entry. This handwriting belongs to Lord Thomas Ward, your father. And yet the words tell us it was Charles Grey who went to meet Avery that night. But look closely, the ink changes halfway through the entry. Someone added to this later. Someone tried to make it appear as though your father wrote this confession himself. Evelyn's voice trembled. But who would do such a thing? Poirot looked toward the staircase. Someone who feared discovery. Someone who still has access to this house. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the three of them sat in the dimly lit study. Poirot laid both photographs on the table side by side, the original with Thomas Avery and the altered one with Charles Grey replacing him. He turned to Evelyn. Madam, who kept these photographs all these years? I thought they were lost, she said. After my father's death, everything was packed away. Poirot nodded slowly. Then someone found them, altered one, and used it to send a warning, or perhaps a message to silence those who knew. He tapped his finger on the table. Jonathan Rain, the painter, was likely the last living witness. He took the photograph that night, and when he discovered what had been done to it, he was killed. Hensley frowned. But why kill the butler, too? Poirot's eyes were distant. Because Howard served this family for decades. He knew where the truth was buried, literally. When he came too close, he joined the others. The house grew quiet. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows like a whisper. Poirot sat back in his chair, thinking. Then, suddenly, a faint sound, a creak from the hallway above. Evelyn startled. There! You hear it! Poirot raised a hand for silence. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate footstep, then another. Hensley drew his pistol. Stay here. He climbed the stairs cautiously, Poirot following close behind. At the end of the hallway, a door stood ajar, the attic. Hensley pushed it open. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air. Cobwebs hung from the beams. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, in the far corner, a figure stepped from the shadows. An elderly man, thin, with pale eyes and a trembling hand. Poirot recognized him at once. George Hill. The man smiled weakly. You always were the clever one, Poirot. I wondered how long it would take. Hensley kept his pistol steady. You're supposed to be dead. Nearly was, Hill said softly. The accident in Cairo wasn't an accident at all. Someone tried to silence me. So I disappeared. Changed my name. But I've been watching. Waiting. Poirot's voice was calm but sharp. Waiting for what? For the truth to come out, Hill said. For the lies to rot away. But when Rain started asking questions, I knew the past had found me again. You killed him, Hensley said. Hill shook his head. No, I warned him. I told him to leave it alone. But he wouldn't listen. And then he was gone. Poirot studied the man closely. His hands shook, but his eyes held something else, fear. Then who, Mr. Hill? Who killed him? Hill swallowed hard. Someone who never stopped protecting the Ward family name. Poirot frowned. You mean? Before he could finish, a sound echoed below, glass shattering, a door slamming. Evelyn screamed. Poirot and Hensley rushed downstairs. The drawing-room window was broken, the wind roaring through. Evelyn stood frozen, staring at the floor. The two photographs were gone. That night, Poirot and Hensley stayed at Greystone House. The police searched the grounds, but found nothing. Evelyn sat in silence by the fire, pale and shaken. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. Someone inside this house still guards the truth. Someone who fears what those photographs reveal. He walked to the mantel, where Margaret's portrait hung. The painted eyes stared back coldly. Poirot tilted his head, then reached up to the corner of the frame. The canvas shifted slightly. Behind it, a safe, small and old. The lock broken. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to Lord Ward. Poirot opened one and read aloud. My dearest Thomas, I cannot bear the guilt any longer. What we did to Thomas Avery was wrong. He threatened to expose us, and George acted before I could stop him. Poirot stopped, eyes narrowing. Margaret, he whispered. She wrote this. Evelyn's face went white. My sister. Yes, Poirot said. She knew. She confessed in these letters, but they were never sent. Someone kept them hidden. Someone who knew that if the truth emerged, everything would collapse. He looked toward the window. Jonathan Rain must have discovered these letters while painting her portrait. That is why he was killed. Hensley exhaled slowly. So George Hill murdered Avery, and someone killed Rain to keep that buried. Poirot turned, his gaze steady. No, Inspector. George Hill may have struck the blow, but another hand has guided these deaths. A hand still here. His eyes met Evelyn's. She froze. What are you saying? Poirot spoke quietly, every word deliberate. Your father's handwriting on the diary was forged. The altered photograph was hidden in your home, and you were the only one who remained to control who saw what. The letter, the fear, the photograph, they all came through your hands. Evelyn trembled. No, you're wrong. I didn't kill anyone. Poirot's tone softened, almost sad. Perhaps not by your hand, madam, but your silence killed them all. You protected your family's name above truth. You let lies grow until they claimed every soul connected to that photograph. She sank to her knees, shaking, tears falling silently. Poirot turned away, his voice low. The photograph warned that the crime had not yet happened. But it had. It only waited to be discovered. And now, the past has claimed its due. Hours later, the police led Evelyn away. The letters and diary would tell the rest. Poirot remained in the drawing room alone. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. He reached into his pocket and pulled out one final thing, a fragment of the torn photograph the thief had dropped during their escape. The piece showed the reflection in the window, the faint outline of the photographer's hand. Poirot looked at it and whispered, even the smallest reflection reveals the truth. He placed the fragment in his notebook and stood. The night outside was silent again, but in that silence, Poirot could still hear the echoes of every secret this house had buried. Chapter 4. The Photograph's Final Secret. The storm outside had not stopped. Rain lashed against the windows of the Thornleigh estate, and thunder rolled like distant drums. Inside the drawing room, Poirot stood before the great mantelpiece, his sharp eyes moving from face to face. Every person gathered in that room looked uneasy. Lady Evelyn, pale and trembling. Martin Gray, the young curator, drenched from his arrival. Inspector Hale, hovering near the door with his notebook clutched tight. And in the center of it all, beneath the flickering chandelier, stood the photograph. It was no longer framed. It lay on the table, under a sheet of glass, and its mystery was finally about to be spoken aloud. Poirot's voice was calm. measured. Each word felt like a step in the dark. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the time for speculation is over. The truth, at last, is ready to reveal itself." No one spoke. The wind rattled the windows. Poirot turned his attention to Lady Evelyn. "You said this photograph haunted you from the moment it was discovered in your attic. You said you feared what it contained, yet you did not understand it. But I believe deep down you did." Lady Evelyn swallowed hard. I didn't know what it meant," she whispered. "Perhaps not consciously," Poirot replied. "But something inside you recognized what your eyes could not accept." He gestured toward the photograph. "At first, it seemed simple, a snapshot taken 20 years ago at Thornleigh, before your husband's death. A group of friends. Laughter. Youth. But one face, one single face, did not belong there." Martin Gray spoke up. The man standing behind them, he said quietly, "The one no one remembered." Poirot nodded. "Yes, a stranger among familiar smiles. A man whose presence made no sense. When I studied the photograph under magnification, I saw what others missed. The light fell differently on him. The grain was not uniform. This man was added to the image later." Lady Evelyn gasped. "Added? But how?" "By hand," Poirot said. "Not recently. The alteration was done with chemicals and precision, the kind used by a professional photographer in the early years of image manipulation. Someone wanted this face in that picture. Someone wanted history rewritten. Inspector Halle Fronet. But why? What's the purpose of adding someone into a 20-year-old photo?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Because it changes the meaning entirely. It turns a memory into a message." He paused, letting silence hang heavy. The man added to the picture is the murderer. Every head turned toward the photograph as if it could speak for itself. The air felt dense, electric. "Who is he?" Martin asked, his voice shaking slightly. Poirot's eyes flicked toward Lady Evelyn. "The man's name is Thomas Gray." Martin blinked. "That's my father's name." "Yes," Poirot said softly. "And he was not the innocent victim history believed him to be. Nor was he the man who vanished after the fire at Thornleigh 20 years ago. He was here, all along. That photograph was his confession." Lady Evelyn's hand trembled against her lips. "Confession?" she whispered. Poirot began to pace slowly, his words deliberate. "Years ago, there was an affair between Thomas Gray and your late sister, Margaret. It was a secret that could destroy reputations. When your husband found out, he confronted Gray. There was a struggle, a fire, and 2 men were presumed dead. But one body was never truly identified. The ashes were believed to be Thomas Gray's, yet the photograph proves otherwise. He lived. Inspector Halle Fronet. If he lived, then where was he all these years?" "Hidden," Poirot said. "Protected. Someone here kept a secret. Someone who helped him vanish." His gaze fixed again on Lady Evelyn. She stiffened, her eyes widening as realization dawned. "You," Poirot said quietly. "You helped him escape." Her voice broke. I thought he was innocent. He said my husband attacked him. He begged for help. I couldn't. You hit him," Poirot finished. "You faked the evidence of his death. And in that photograph, taken weeks after the fire, you stood beside him once more. You kept the picture all these years, a reminder of your guilt. And when you found it again, someone else saw it too." Martin's eyes darkened. "Me," he said. "I found it in the attic when cataloging her collection." "Yes," Poirot replied. "And you realized that the man beside Lady Evelyn was your father. You confronted her. You demanded the truth." Martin looked down. "She begged me to stay silent. She said it would destroy her. And yet," Poirot continued, "someone did not stay silent. Because a week later, Lady Evelyn's secretary, Miss Clara Hughes, was found dead. Poisoned." Inspector Halle spoke. "You're saying—" "Yes," Poirot said. "Miss Hughes discovered the same secret. She threatened to reveal it. And that, my friends, was her death sentence. Lady Evelyn's face turned white. No, I didn't. Poirot raised his hand. No, my lady, you did not poison her. But someone close to you did. Someone who shared your guilt, your fear of exposure. He turned toward the door. You may come in now. A shadow moved from the hallway. Slowly, a man stepped into the room, his face gaunt, eyes haunted. Martin stumbled backward. Father! Thomas Gray stood trembling, his clothes soaked from the rain. I didn't mean for any of it to happen, he rasped. It was an accident. He attacked me. I only wanted to protect myself. Poirot's voice softened. And Miss Hughes? Was her death an accident as well? Gray looked down, tears in his eyes. She found the photograph. She knew I was alive. She said she'd go to the police. I begged her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. I put something in her drink. I just wanted to silence her for a moment. Just for a moment. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the crackle of thunder filled the space. Inspector Hale moved forward, his voice low. Thomas Gray, you're under arrest. Gray didn't resist. He looked at Lady Evelyn with a broken expression. I'm sorry. For everything. As Hale led him away, Lady Evelyn collapsed into the nearest chair. The rain outside began to slow. The storm had finally spent itself. Poirot remained still, watching the fading ripples of the tragedy he had uncovered. The truth, as always, had come at a price. After a long silence, Martin spoke. How did you know he was still alive? Poirot looked toward the photograph one last time. Because guilt leaves traces, even when time tries to erase them. The photograph was too perfect, too clean. Someone had gone to great effort to make the past seem peaceful. And only those who fear the truth work so hard to hide it. He straightened his tie and stepped toward the door. The murderer in the photograph was never a mystery of identity. It was a mystery of conscience. As Poirot reached the hall, the camera of the story would linger on the photograph lying under the glass, the faces smiling, frozen in a time that would never smile again. The wind whispered against the windows, soft and hollow. Poirot's voice returned, low and reflective. Photographs capture moments, yes, but they also capture lies, and lies eventually develop in the dark. If you enjoyed this mystery and wish to join Poirot on his next case, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your theories in the comments below. Every clue, every thought brings us closer to the next truth waiting to be uncovered. Until then, keep your eyes open. The next mystery might already be developing just out of sight.